All right, 5, 4.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Designing and Running Effective Meetings Remotely. Now, taking from the very first principles of effective meetings, I'm going to try and start right on time to make best use of the time you've kindly given to me. And I usually like to start my presentation on this with an agenda, another good habit for meetings. So, generally, we're going to touch on who am I? We're going to talk about one of my fun favorite pieces of this topic, which is how do you go about wrecking a meeting? It's always fun to start trying to figure out how to solve a problem by how can you make it worse first. But we're going to segue from there into the first principles. These are the kind of concepts that I build the whole talk on. And then I'm going to talk to you about 3 practical ways you can boil them down and actually apply them to your meetings, whether you are organizing them or attending them. And to help you with that, I've written a little mnemonic, 3 powerful P's: the plan, the purpose, and the pen. And those will make sense as we get there. Now, we are going to be holding questions off till the very end. So if and when you see that little banner, which I am assuming is kind of hovering over my head right about now, ask your questions now. We'll be getting to the question section soon. Feel free, of course, to type your questions into the banner, or I'm sorry, into the chat at any point in time, and we'll get those queued up for the end. But after the question section, I would like to share with you a general summary of the key takeaways from this talk to make it really stick, and then offer to let you guys in on a little secret about the 2 talks we have coming up in the next week, which I think you'll very much enjoy. So without further ado, who am I? I am Daniel Scheufler. I am a Christian, husband, and a father in order of importance, and most recently an improver with our Houston office. It has been my great pleasure to work here for the past, I want to say, about 2 years. Honestly, best place I've ever worked. I sincerely hope you have enjoyed these presentations because this is part of who we are. And when I joined, I found that one of my kind of defining statements, to see with eyes unclouded, came to really be valued here. When I say see with eyes unclouded, I want to try and see past just what I preconceived the thing to be, but actually look at what is the true intent. Are we getting there? Are we doing a good job of talking about it? And very often that's not always as easy as it can seem. But one of the pieces that kind of pinged my little spidey sense on this was meetings. I really don't like watching people wasting their lives in meetings that aren't producing value for them. And so that's kind of the origin of this talk. Now, let's talk about some of the fun stuff first. I want you to think on your own, maybe write down a couple of ideas, but how would you go about wrecking a meeting that you're part of? You don't have to organize this one. Just think as an attendee. What if you really wanted to steal productivity, would you do? When I wrote down this list, I ended up coming up with probably about 5 options. And admittedly, I've seen a lot of these come through myself, which didn't, pull back on the sting of it any, but it was always fun to watch and see, well, is that an actual thing? Would someone do this? And here's what I found. 1, arrive late to the meeting and then demand that you, being the most important person who are now there, be caught up with everything that has happened, which essentially resets the meeting to starting when you got there. Ugh. I've seen people do this. They were trying to make certain they were up to date so that they can actually contribute to the rest of the meeting. And it was initially a good thing. But the 15 minutes that other people had been in that meeting before them suddenly were gone because we had to spend 5 minutes catching this one person up. Subject every day idea to death by committee. Very similar to death by 1,000 cuts. Here we are, we have this idea, we think we might want to go for it, but hold on, we don't want to take on too much risk. We really need to make certain we get everyone on board with this. So let's have them meet and then get back with us. And if they say yes, then we can go with this idea. But until they meet, we shouldn't go any further. Death by committee. Another one that's very similar to this is reopening the decisions that you made last time after the work to implement them has already started. This one really hurts, but especially where you have people who were nervous about new ideas to begin with, they may try and go back and say, well, hold on, we're not seeing progress on this at the speed we thought. We really need to consider the risk of this. Again, it's a good initial thought, but the meeting you just had to make that decision now becomes irrelevant because you have to go back and discuss it again. Sometimes you'll run into someone who really wants to hold the mic. They will talk very often, and every time you make a point, they will try and add a lengthy anecdote, maybe to help prove your point because they've seen it and they really want people to understand that this is important. But every time they talk, you lose a little bit of time to go talk about the rest of the content. And sometimes this just takes the idea of bringing up something that's not relevant to the topic. This may be the thing that's top of mind to this person, but the meeting was about something else. And again, the thought is that they're trying to deal with the thing most important to them at the wrong moment. Again, these people aren't evil, but they are falling into a pattern that's a little scary. In fact, as I did more research on these kind of behaviors, I found out that there's actually a field manual for this. All 5 of those appear in what's called the OSS Simple Sabotage Field Manual. This was a little booklet published by the precursor to the CIA to distribute to rebels in enemy-occupied territory around World War II, like the French, literally instructing them how to sabotage the German war machine by doing things that would look exactly like an operation taken a little too extreme, but still well within the realms of wanting to work, and would grind that machine, that factory, that office to a halt. And that's what's so scary about this. I can guarantee you, you've probably never seen a saboteur. Like, legitimately, the people you work with who have done those behaviors aren't actually out to get you. But they may be operating under a premise or an understanding that is less than useful. And when I started noticing this pattern, one thing came very clear to me. Meetings, the reason why we have them at all is for people, right? We can't have meetings with computers. We have meetings for the people, and our priorities need to shift because the tool is meant to serve, not be served. The right priorities are the right people, the right ideas, the right technology to support the first 2, and in that order. If you get the right tech, but you have the wrong people, meeting's not effective. If you have the right people and you have the wrong tech, you've harmed the meeting. But maybe you can still be effective, but it's still going to be hard. You want to nail it and have all 3 right if you can. But those first 2 are the most important because the right people armed with the right ideas can work around a technical problem. So that leads into our first principles. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about the nature of this talk. You have 2 competing ideas, effectiveness and efficiency. This talk is intended to aim at effectiveness. Now, efficiency, I usually accommodate to say, I used to take 30 minutes to do this, now I do it in 15. That's more efficient because I did the same amount of work in half the time. And it can kind of get people to feeling like, okay, they got to hurry up, they got to hurry up, they got to follow the rules, they got to get out of the way. That's not what I'm trying to help you build here. What I'm hoping to arm you with are tools and ideas that will allow you to make effective meetings. You need to kind of know what you're looking for to get there and be willing to adapt your path, your technology, or maybe even the right set of people to get to the value you're actually seeking. Effectiveness, I find, talks more about focus than about time to value. So when you spend an hour in a meeting, my hope is to help you get the full hour's value from that meeting, not take a 1-hour meeting and do it in 15 minutes. Which leads us to the next question. So if we're talking about effective versus efficient meetings, maybe we should talk about these meeting things first. Why do we use them in the first place? I mentioned that there are 4 people, that's great, but why did this tool come about? Well, digging through this, I think there are 3 general answers, and this doesn't cover everything, but it covers a lot. You can use meetings to distribute information. These are the ones where the classic joke, I just survived a meeting that could have been an email, comes from. They're distributing information in a less than effective means. Very often, you'll see meetings that are there for making decisions. Okay, guys, we have this problem. How are we going to address it? And then the last kind is more common, especially for developers, the construct ideas meeting. Okay, we have this user story. How are we going to get there? And each of these covers a very broad category, of course. But being armed with a loose way to categorize what is this meeting for? Is it to distribute information? Or is it to distribute information and then make a decision? Or is it perhaps distribute some information, construct some ideas, and then maybe later you'll have them make a decision after the ideas have been evaluated? But being able to talk about it helps you choose your focus. Now, keep in mind, There we are. Meetings are a tool, and an expensive one. But like all tools, they have a purpose. The trick with it being an expensive one, very often people will think, yeah, okay, so it's money, right? 5 people in an hour-long meeting at consultant rates probably reaches $1,000. Was my discussion worth $1,000? Sure, that's one way to look at it. But I want you to think about it a little differently. When you as the attendee are invited to a meeting, you're being asked to spend both time and money on the company's behalf. Time and money. You are spending a resource, your focus, your time, and the money that the company is paying you during that time to go and hopefully deliver some value. Very often that initial reaction when I recognize I'm spending resources on behalf of another is, hold on, do I need to solve it this way? Or can I solve this problem some other way? Again, back to that joke, I just survived another meeting that could have been an email. Because a lot of distributed information meetings could literally just be an email. Hey, you need to be aware of this, boom. Now, there is an entire other talk about how to effectively use email to replace meetings, but that's a different question because not all meetings can be replaced. But when you agree to go to a meeting, or if you're about to ask to organize one, ask yourself genuinely, is the thing I am asking for worth the trade in resources I am asking? And I would like to suggest that when you look at the expense, don't look at just the money. Money comes and goes, we spend it in order to invest it. This is okay. But you are spending a non-renewable resource. You're spending an hour of 5 lives in a 5-person meeting. I personally feel it is my responsibility when I organize such a meeting to make certain that I made good use of those 5 lives. I invested in them, that they got something equally out of it, and that they feel that their lives were respected and well spent. So meetings are an expensive tool, just in more ways than we think. Now, at the beginning of my talk, I alluded to a nice little mnemonic, and so I want to reintroduce it to you again, the 3 powerful P's. That is the plan, the purpose, and the pen, which correspond to 3 phases of every meeting. And I'm hoping that you'll start to see the connection because all 3 of them have a very similar focus. It's just how you apply it relative to the time of the meeting changes. So first up, we have the plan, which corresponds to before your meeting, right? You have to plan before you go do. And of course, the very first question you need to ask yourself is, does this need a meeting? Now, I've already harped on this enough, so I'll just boil it down to, if the answer is yes, this needs a meeting, good, continue to plan. If not, find another means to solve it. Maybe there's a creative technical solution, or maybe it's just an email. But I'm going to trust you as the organizers to figure out the right way to do it. Now, as the attendees, does this need a meeting needs to be answered to you. Ideally, that will come in the title of the meeting and in the agenda. And if it doesn't, ask. You, unfortunately, as the attendees, have effective meetings hard mode, where the organizers have it easy mode. You are going to be called to do some things that may be a little uncomfortable socially, but you can succeed if you do it the right way. So when you ask why, make certain that it's explained, if they don't naturally know your intent, that your goal is to spend the resources for the company in the wisest way possible. People won't get mad for, oh, he wants to make certain he's doing well by us. That's useful, and it builds your relationships up. Now, organizers, the next question after you know you have a meeting is, do you know that these are the right people? Now, as a tool to get you there, I will recommend the RACI chart. This is a nice little, I want to say it's an acronym, basically, responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed. Every person in your organization will fall into that category with respect to your meeting. Now, I think it will be more clear if I use an example. I'm going to give you the example from a stance of what person does what and how their role changes based upon the what you're asking. So let's take a nice easy one. You've got a customer meeting coming up because you're delivering software and you're about to go deploy it to their environment. Okay, the project or product manager is most likely the one who's held accountable. This meeting did happen, right? The client contact needs to be consulted so that you can talk about, hey, when would this be good for you? Because if they don't tell you it's good for them, then you're just scheduling a meeting in the blank, not helpful. Now, the dev lead on the team and the developer are both in an informed category. They don't really have to be part of this meeting. You're just giving them an update. But if something comes back as customer feedback, it'd be really good to let the dev lead and developers know, whether it be good feedback like, hey, they love this new feature you guys released. Please, by the way, tell us that. That really helps our morale. Or, hey, they were a little curious about this thing. Can you write up some better help documentation? Okay, yeah. But that's the informed category. They don't need to be in the meeting. Their time can be spent doing other things. Now, if you're talking about deliver a feature, well, now you're getting into the place where the developers have to be dealing with it. Now, the project manager will naturally be consulted. When is we're going to deliver this feature? Hey, we're pulling that in this sprint. And there needs to be a dialogue there. The dev lead, being over the team, can be held accountable for the feature was in fact delivered. But he may not be the one actually writing the code, which means he's not responsible. That responsibility may belong to the developer who is actually there mashing code into the keyboard and then making certain it's tested and that it's ready to go. And of course, as we're working on it, it would behoove us to inform the client that we're doing this. It builds up that sense of excitement, it builds their buy-in, it's all of these wonderful things, but they don't have to be involved in the meeting about delivering the feature. They just need to say, hey, here's the thing. And then of course, deploy software. Project manager needs to be informed. The dev lead is likely accountable for doing it because they're going to have some meeting to talk to the customer contact to make certain it's set up for them. The developer who wrote the feature will likely need to tell you, by the way, you need to do these things. But he's consulted, he doesn't necessarily have to be there. And then of course, the customer contact will be responsible for making certain it got onto their system. Now, of course, this is a general way, but it's a useful way for you to start breaking down who do I need and why? Is their role for this thing as accountable or responsible? Okay, good. Those are likely people you want to bring into the meeting. Is their role consulted? Yes. Those you have the choice. Do they need to be in the meeting because you need to pull ideas out of them? Or do you just really need to make certain you have that information ahead of time? The informed group, generally you only need to let them know it happened afterwards, and here's the path we're taking. And so they don't have to spend the physical time in the meeting. But remember, the consulted group, you have a choice to make. And that choice is informed by getting the right ideas in the meeting. Ask yourself, what do you expect? Do you expect that the attendees are going to come in with a certain amount of foreknowledge? I mean, if that's the case, then you probably need to let them know, hey guys, I'm expecting you to already be familiar with. This would be a place where you could pull the information out of your consulted person and put it into the email or the agenda and making certain that everyone has it in advance. Do you expect the attendees to come with a couple of ideas pre-baked so that they can run with them? That would be a form of preparation. And then the last one that I would beg of you, clarify your expectations on what will this meeting achieve. Are you just having us here to decide on X? Are you having us here to produce new ideas? Or is it just to get information to us? Knowing what that outcome is expected to be allows your attendees to be prepared. Attendees, if you don't know if you are the right person on the RACI chart, or you don't know any of those three things, again, ask. Because you want to spend the time most wisely, it's easy to ask, hey, should I come in with anything prepared? And what are we expecting out of this? How can I best help us get there? Because the eager helper gets really good results. Now, in all of this, I want to bring this back home. We're in the middle of a very uncomfortable social time. People are all working remote, stress is high, and so communication needs to be managed very carefully. Now, as the organizers and as the attendees, we need to be picking our who. We need to make certain we're the right people to attend these meetings. We need to tell the people we're inviting to the meetings how to prepare. We need to help them not waste the time and not feel like their time is simply being wasted or they're yanked across the chain. How we tell them will build or break our relationships, and we need strong relationships. Now, one of the things that can come up with this is the fear of missing out. You all of a sudden find out that you're in the informed category, but you really, really want to be in the consulted category. Just really wanting to be does not make you in that party. Now, being in the informed party does not make you worth less to the organization. It is merely that for this thing, because we want to help you protect your time, we may not pull you in right now. Now, if they find out they're wrong, Okay, you go and you learn, but you help. But trust the people who are trying to organize and lead you to go that step further. And if they're talking to you and you're not certain that you're actually accountable, responsible on this, talk to them and say, hey, I'm not really certain I should be here. Like, I could definitely listen in, but that's not the highest value thing I could be doing. I could go get you this. And talk to them through about that trade. Because the how you talk to them about this builds your stronger relationships. And you need stronger relationships for certain kinds of meetings. For example, let's talk about a possible psychological safety need. If you're going through a create ideas meeting, you're gonna be kind of rubbing up against some uncomfortable things to talk about. This is new, you've never done it before. And so you need to build psychological safety by having a relationship with the people in that meeting that says, you may ideate here and I'm not gonna make fun of you even if the idea is a little crazy. Now that's just one, but I'm certain, spend a little time. You can think of many different ways where the people need to be invested and comfortable with each other in order to have the best outcome for a meeting. So, for the plan, organizers, please push the information to your attendees. Invite the right people and tell them what you're hoping to do or what you expect. Attendees, if it's not there, pull. Or if you're not entirely certain, ask for clarification. Make certain that you are the right people. And again, do that in a way that builds up the relationship between you and the organizer and helps them see that your goal, your intent, is build the relationship, build the organization. And of course, if the organizer hasn't told you, ask them what they expect. Which brings us to the next P, the purpose, or during the meeting. So let's start right quick with get the right ideas. Start with why the meeting is happening. Start with the thing that is most important, your purpose first. A statement such as the goal of this meeting is to decide on the course of the company, is to generate ideas for how we can solve this problem. But now you've made the statement and everyone in the room is suddenly more or less on board, this is where we're going. And you can refer back to it as you need to build up the meeting. Now with that being simple, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a trick question. We need to use the right technology, right? And of course, in this digital age, we've got a plethora of technologies that can be used to improve meetings. What one everyday technology enables a meeting to really get effective? The answer might be a little bit silly, but it's a pen and paper. Take notes. You can do this. Now, of course, it doesn't actually have to be a pen and paper because being in the digital age, I could use my Evernote for this because I admit I like my Evernote. Or you could use Word or anything else you like. You've got a nice little drawing tablet and want to scribble your notes? Go for it. But take notes because you will need to go through this and remember what happened. Putting pen to paper takes something that is transient and temporal and fuses it into something hard and will stick. Take notes, especially on the kind of things that have been assigned or on the decisions that are rendered. Now, that's really important for this next step, which boils down to, so now that I have talked about my why in the meeting and people are on board, and now I have talked about or made certain that as we're going through and doing this meeting and making the decisions, that we have lined up where people, hopefully someone remembers, now we can talk about what we need to do with that information. Before you go, and I recommend this for every meeting, at the end of every meeting, please review the action items you have. This has a bunch of really useful effects, but before I jump into those, I'd like to recommend a format that is very easy, non-threatening, and fairly easy to repeat. Try a who to do what by when format. This does very powerful things. One, when you literally say, Daniel is going to review the meeting notes by when? Tomorrow, and send out a summary. Who means that the person who's supposed to do this suddenly perks up because they heard their name. The what? Be specific. It needs to be something achievable, not so-and-so to go and research blank options. Try something like, so-and-so will research 3 options and provide a summary by next meeting, right? That what is the thing that is the value your meeting drove down to? This is the thing you need to make the next step. But if you miss the last portion, the when, you lose momentum. Because it could be say, so-and-so is going to do what? Hey, have you done it yet? No. Well, nuts. You want to build your momentum by asking the when question. Now, of course, this is going to end up having people ask questions. That's fine. Adjust what was recorded as part of that conversation. So leave 5, maybe 10 minutes at the end of an hour-long meeting just to focus on action items and clarify the expectations of what will come from this meeting. But it's that momentum that you want to build up, that feeling that people coming to these meetings are valuable, are effective, and that they are now generating the value that the company needs, which leans very heavily into our be human aspect. We want our people to contribute. That's why we had a meeting, right? I couldn't come up with all of this on my own. So I have to have people come in. I need their minds engaged. And one of the best ways you can do that is pull them into the why you are having the meeting. If they understand the purpose and that we are focused, it becomes much easier to quiet down all of the chatter going on in your head and zoom in on that thing you need to actually get down. And with this focus, you need to be careful. We do want our people focused, but how we correct them strongly impacts the effectiveness we ourselves as organizers or as attendees will have in the organization going forward. Remember, we're all kind of stressed, and so sometimes we need a little silliness. And so it's okay to get off focus, but how you curb the team back into the actual focus of the meeting strongly tells them about what you value. If you say, yeah, enough chatter, guys, come on, back on target. That sends the message that what I'm interested in is the thing itself, not them. Here, especially as people are freaking out a little bit or are uncomfortable, you want to build that sense of, I value you. And you can do that by a gentle correction, by pulling them in. That's hilarious. Now help me figure out how to connect this to the other thing. And you can just make it an ask, like you are admitting gently to a weakness you have while admitting that was funny and I need your help bringing us back. You've enlisted them again in the why and are building a momentum by having the what you're doing be known and be focused so that people feel they're making progress. And yeah, it's a feeling, but a useful one. Now, here I want to start with a review of the purpose, but talking to the attendees. Remember, the meeting should start with a why. If you don't know what it is, if it's not stated, ask. Help the meeting stay on target by doing the ask. It may be a little uncomfortable, but you can always just ask, so, hey, I just got clear of another meeting. Can you help me recenter? What is our goal here? Right? That's not a threatening question. It's not trying to usurp control or saying, hey, you really don't know what you're talking about. It's help me help you, which again, pulls them in. As the attendee, if you don't see anyone else taking notes, please do it yourself. And even if you see someone else taking them, do it yourself, because there's a chance that one of you misses something that the other catches. And of course, at the end, especially if you got assigned action items, verify them before you go. If you can't convince the organizer to take 5 minutes at the end, go corner the organizer for 3 minutes at the end for yours to make certain you know what's up. Now, organizers, since you set up the meeting, you know the why, and it is part of your role to keep the meeting on target because you asked for the meeting. You are now the steward over the resources that are being spent. It's on you. Hey, let's try and keep this meeting on target by saying this is our goal. Pardon me. Now, of course, you being the organizer may not be able to take the notes. That's okay. Being the organizer also gives you permission to ask someone to take notes for you. A meeting I have recently joined with several high-level people, what we basically did was, hey, CIO says, okay, I need someone to volunteer as scribe. Okay. And they're the scribe for that meeting. And their job is capture all the action items, send out the summary at the end, and we're done. And then the next meeting, someone else picks it up. And this is a good way to create that rolling sense of we are building this together, not this guy and then this guy are responsible for running it, and I can just laze about. Now, of course, as the organizer, your goal is to build the momentum towards getting the thing done. So you'll need to make certain that the people who got assigned an action item, actually know they were assigned. Because even though you say so-and-so is going to do, that so-and-so may not have agreed or may not understand what they're being asked. So get confirmation on it that, hey, yes, this is what I want and that this is what I'm going to go off and do. Good. Makes your life easy. And the notes that either the attendees or the organizers are taking in this now enable the last section, which is the pen, or after the meeting. Now, there's a quote here that I really enjoy that describes this practically perfectly. History will be kind to me. I intend to write it. Often attributed to Winston Churchill. But the core idea here is history is written by the winners. The person who records history controls what has happened. That's a lot of power to wield by taking notes, I think. But in all seriousness, you need to record the history. If you fail to do so, somebody else will, and what they say may not match what actually happened. Or it won't contain the information you need it to. So when you record history, please record all the decisions and or the actions that you are holding the group to. Yes, this is what we're aiming at. Now, here I will recommend again the who does what by when format for your action items. If you need to record something like, say, an idea for a create ideas meeting, try just like a 1 or 2 sentence summary of here was the general gist of the idea. What if we used this thing over here to do it like that? Right? Just enough that someone who reads it, we're like, oh, right, that. And then with the decisions or the talking points, provide a synopsis. Now, this is tailored specifically to the informed group, the people who were not in the meeting but need to know what happened. Of course, you're going to be sending it to the attendees as well. But with the synopsis, there's a lot that needs to be handled gently. For example, you don't want necessarily to reveal that there was a high amount of contention with this issue unless it's still an open decision. But if the one who is the decision maker has made a decision, the best way you can invest in the value to the organization is to say X was decided and not mention the side conversations. You can mention A and B were discussed, A was selected. This is a good way to provide that synopsis. But remember, when you're holding the power of the pen, you are writing history, and it becomes very important that you wield that well. Now, why should we record history? Well, there are a bunch of different options I have for that, but the easiest answers basically boil down to, if it wasn't recorded, it didn't happen. Organizations that I've been part of have been notoriously bad at remembering what we decided if we didn't write it down. Oh yeah, I remember we talked about this, and the person who remembers this idea as being their favorite will probably say, and I think this is what we decided. The person who said, no, that's a terrible idea. Well, okay, now you just have he said, she said. Record it so that it happened and that people can go back and use it again. At minimum, just to help people see the direction that the company's going. Or, if you have no record, now you have other problems. So talking about the action items, you're supposed to have a who does what by when. Suppose you forgot to write down the when. There's no record, just that you were going to do an X. Okay, well, yeah, I said I would do X, but I haven't had time yet. And momentum dies. Well, nuts. And it's really not their fault. They said, yes, I would do that, but I don't have time until 2 weeks from now. That's not what we wanted. Suppose instead you just failed to write it down altogether, and you had other decisions built on the fact that someone would have done the research ahead of time, and the decision meeting comes up, and there's nothing. How can you hold them accountable just because you said it? It's much easier to say, look, we wrote this down. What's going on? Did you miss it? Should I have adjusted how I told you? But you make it more difficult on yourself to get the value you want for your organization, whether as an attendee or an organizer, if there is no record, which is why taking the notes ends up being one of the more powerful techniques you can use in a meeting. Because if either of these record pieces fails, if it didn't get recorded and people don't remember the decision, it practically didn't happen. Or if there is no record and now we cannot move forward because it is difficult for us to hold accountable the person who was supposed to do work, the meeting failed in its primary objective, doing and producing value for the people in the organization. And that's not an effective meeting. Now, as the next step, be human. The reason we're sharing our notes is to clarify the expectations we have about what just happened in the meeting. You need to be able to state, we decided X, you're gonna do Y. But if I just say it like that, A, I'm sounding like a robot, and B, I miss the ability to build the relationships with the people who I need to continue working well with. How you share those notes, email blast, or an impersonal statement of X, Y, Z, hurts. Better relationships will lead to better meetings. Now, when you're talking about how you share your notes, I have a personal story on this. I worked for a telemedicine company, and they had a notorious bad habit of a meeting would happen and then they'd forget, and so they'd have another meeting to figure out the thing. And so I got annoyed and I started taking notes. Okay, guys, here's what I think we just said. Is that right? And I would just confirm it at the time of the action item. I was like, okay, so-and-so is going to do X, right? And I need to do Y. I would apply the same thing to myself. But as I did that, I kind of got invited to meetings where I wasn't doing the work, but they needed someone who could do that, could drive it to the point and bring value back out of it by having the notes. One thing that changed in particular was how I related to my manager at the time. He had suddenly inherited the entire organization because of some changes in structure. And so he was invited to meetings at the same time in 3 different places. And so he had to choose very carefully, which one am I gonna be in? And he would choose the ones I wasn't in, because I had gotten in the habit of taking my notes and then emailing them to the people who were in attendance, or at least listed as need to know attendees, of which he was always one. And when I asked him, hey, I've noticed you've stopped showing up to these meetings. Do you want me to tell you what's going on? He said, yes, please. But I don't go to them because I can trust that you're going to tell me what happened. So every time you go to a meeting now, just send the email, but then give me like the 5-minute executive summary of the most important thing that's happening. And if anything gets blocked, let me know immediately. Okay. And this was a way that I helped the organization by doing something that allowed someone else not to have to be in the meeting. You can do the same thing by figuring out the ways in which the people who are important and need to know in your organization prefer to be informed. For him, he preferred I come talk to him rather than send him an email. There were others who would really much rather have it in writing because they can't get to it right now. They have other things to do, but I'll read it. Find the way that communicates best with them and then build the relationships by helping them get the value that they're targeting. Now, can that work at all times? No. But if you think about the fact that what we are in an organization is a bunch of human beings trying to get something valuable, it makes it a little easier to think creatively about how can I get there. Sometimes it requires us as attendees letting go of the fear of missing out. I wasn't important to this meeting, and so it is okay by me not to be involved. Now, I care very deeply about this thing, and I can communicate to them, but I should not insist I be in part of that meeting. As the organizer, it comes with the ability of talking, hey, here's what we agreed on and what I need you to do in order for this other meeting to be effective. Let me give you what you need to work on, and then let's talk about the right amount of time you'll need to do it, which is clarifying that action item you talked about. And sometimes that may mean the uncomfortable conversation of, hey, you missed it. How can we make certain it happens this time? And having that in a way, because of the way you've dealt with the other meetings in the past, can be easier if you've already invested. Now, I would like to take a few moments to allow any comments or curiosities to be shared by the group. Michael, if you have any questions queued for me, I'd be very appreciative to hear them.
Hey, Daniel, I do have a few questions for you here. The first one is, how do you make a team join a meeting in time, especially if there is already an established pattern of late shows?
This ends up being one of my favorite patterns. Easiest way I can suggest to solve this, lead by example. If you expect people to be on time for a meeting and you don't start them on time, you're saying, I don't really expect people to be on time. My recommendation, and I've tried this in the past and had some success, when I have communicated about it ahead of time, hey guys, we have this meeting starting at 12. I'm going to start at 12 on the dot, and hopefully we'll finish early, is a statement about not only what I'm going to do, which warns the team, but also sets them up with the, wait, why is he doing that? He's not just being a stickler for being a stickler's sake. He's setting it up so that I can get my time back. I like that. I'll bust my butt to be there on time. And when they get there late, don't stop the meeting to cajole them. Don't do anything. Just keep going. And a couple of times, they're going to be late, especially if that's already the culture and the pattern. But when I have done this in the past, people adjusted their expectations of my meetings because they knew when I said 12, I was starting at 12, even if they're not there. Now, if it gets particularly bad, where there's one particular case of you really can't have this meeting without that person and they're still late, my recommendation is, if they're consistently 15 minutes late and you can see they have that time block on their calendar ahead of time, adjust your meeting, give them a 15-minute white space. You can schedule around it. Or, more effectively, actually go and have the conversation and say, hey, I noticed consistently you're running late to these meetings. I don't want to lose company's time or money by having to wait on this. What's the best way I can get these meetings so that you can get to them without having to rush or be crazy? Because I see you're in meetings all day. Do you need a bio break? I can schedule 15 minutes around that for you if you'd like. But turn it into a group build for this. I think that should be a good and sufficient thing to try first. What else?
Thank you. Let's see, and a similar question. Outlook has a feature of taking 15 minutes off the end of your meetings to give you the time to transition. What are your thoughts on using this feature?
I admit I am ambivalent about this feature. I have taken to adjusting the common scheduled time on my calendar from being the block 30 or hour down to 15-minute blocks so that I can control it down to the 15-minute mark. And yes, I do have 15-minute meetings. I don't like relying on technology to solve a problem that is likely in the ideas category. Generally, what I would try and do is communicate, this is how we're going to run it. So when I send out an agenda, I'll include a rough timeline of I expect to send about 10-ish minutes on this, and at the end, we're going to have 5 minutes to deal with this. And if I notice I'm starting to back to back, what I'll start doing is scheduling that 15-minute transition or bio break time for the group I just had in my meeting, and then scheduling my meeting physically for 15 less minutes. This is a statement outward to the people who are in this meeting for me. I am trying to protect your time and use it wisely. I'm not going to rely on technology to do that. I'm going to state, this is what I want to save this time for. So we will be done by that time. Now, there's always the give and take on that, but that is my interpretation.
Thank you for that. My next question from the audience is, could you share some examples of how you have influenced meeting organizers to be respectful of who should participate in a meeting?
Okay. The easiest one is the power of the chair. Literally, your butt is either in a chair or it's not. As an attendee, the most effective way I have ever run this is to talk to the organizer prior to the meeting and say, hey, are you sure I'm really needed for this? And they're like, yeah, or they don't get back to me. And so I'll show up in the meeting and that'll be the first question. Hey, what are we trying here? And when I hear it and I'm like, I don't think I can contribute to this. If I'm wrong, come get me, but I'm going to go back to my desk and do work. And I'll tell that to the organizer, not to the wider group, but I'll tell some variant of that. So it's very clear. I don't think I'm producing value here. I'm going to go do the best I can to do that for you elsewhere. And if I'm wrong, come get me and I'll adjust. And that's one piece. And very often that will cause a conversation to happen from the organizer to me later, which opens up the ability for me to share, hey, here's why I did that. Are you certain all the people that were in that meeting are the right people? Now, just as an attendee, you can't do that wider, but you could save your own time. And I have found cases where when I left, 6 other people followed me because they were of the same boat. It's like, I really don't need to be here. Best example I had was when we were doing a release meeting and we switched from all the devs need to be here to report on their progress on fixing these regression bugs to now we're talking about like a DevOps thing in some server that no one had heard of, and all the devs still had work to do. So I'm like, I'm gonna go fix bugs. Is that okay? And the guy leading the meeting gave me a thumbs up, so I'm out. And then I look over my shoulder and 5 other devs have followed me out because they're in the same boat. Don't be afraid to lead by example. It will be uncomfortable at first time, so communicate your intent through it to get the best results.
Thank you, Daniel. I think that's all the questions we have at this time.
Very good. Okay, so I want to give one quick summary and a quick sneak peek of the things that are coming down the pipeline. Remember your 3 Ps. Those were the plan, pick your who, tell them what you expect, and if you don't know what is expected of you as the attendee, ask. The purpose during the meeting, start with your why. Start with what are you gonna get out of this. Make certain there are notes being taken because recording history is important. And of course, review them at the end so that everyone exits on the same page. And the stuff that we wanted to take out of this is well known. And of course, the pen. record history, and inform your group well, so that you never have to worry about, well, as soon as Daniel takes over this thing, that thing goes into a black hole and we don't hear anything about it until there's a problem. Build that respect, build the relationships as you go and do this. Now, of course, with 2 key points through all 3 topics, clarify your expectations. When you're in the planning phase, clarify what you expect them to have ready, clarify what you are hoping to achieve, and roughly how you plan to spend the time. When you're in the meeting, re-clarify at the very beginning, get them all centered on that nucleus, and then make certain to help them keep their focus. And of course, as you create action items or make decisions, clarify. Always assume you didn't get it perfectly right until you state it aloud and get people to kind of agree or disagree on that and get it out in the meeting so it doesn't have to go another cycle. And then at the end, clarify your expectations by sharing your notes. Here are the action items we took. Here's what we did. Here's what we decided. Now we're good to go. And of course, in all of these, remember to be human. Stronger relationships yield better meetings, will yield better results. You'll be able to have the conversations like I was suggesting with your organizers if you have a good personal working relationship. You will be able to influence the right people in the meetings. You will influence outcomes by building stronger relationships. And you'll get better results out of meetings when people can have real conversations and know that they're going to be respected. When they can have that honest conversation about, I can't get you that action item right now because it's too soon. When you have the relationships that people are not afraid, you can build a better meeting and better results out of it to truly build the momentum you want for your organization. Now, I do have some resources that I would love to share for anyone looking how to do this better. Some of them are from EntreLeadership, some of them are just blog posts, but all of these I think in particular are very useful. There is a podcast called the User Experience Podcast, which literally talks about designing a better meeting, which touches on some of these principles. There's an EntreLeadership podcast called Know, Feel, Do, which talks about how you think through the purpose of a meeting or of a sales pitch or just about anything so that you can leave people with the frame of mind of this is the path we're going to go and here's why. I like to recommend The Trusted Advisor by David H. Maister et al., who is a fantastic book talking about how you build trust and these relationships through the way in which you conduct your meetings. And even there's this little fun blog post out of UK government software development that talks about a novel approach to how they solved a communication problem within the meetings. Then, of course, I had my Winston Churchill quote. I have some references on the ratio chart and the recency effect, which I recommend the review of the action items from. But more interesting than all of that, we have 2 upcoming talks coming in the next week. This week on Friday, Joe Brinkman is going to be talking about automating builds and deployments with Azure DevOps. And the key to developing high quality software is following a high quality process. But I mean, if you don't follow the process, it doesn't help. So this talk is going to talk about how automating your builds and deployments with Azure DevOps can provide you additional peace of mind through producing a high quality process. Claudio, on next Wednesday, is going to be talking about trust IT, bridging the gaps between the vision and the execution between product owners and developers. Have you ever wished that there was some way to improve the collaboration between the developers, the people with the technical skills, and the non-technical people? Have you ever wished that we could just trust each other? Attending this presentation, and you'll get to see ways to bridge that large gap that's honestly been built through, and you can build a common ground with the people who are better able to contribute to the success of the projects by trusting IT, by building the trust between the 2 disparate groups. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you guys for joining us and for the very insightful questions. We have a few more moments if there are any questions that have come in since then, Michael.
We have no more questions, Daniel. Thank you for your talk.
Well, then I should like to return 10 minutes back to you, the audience. Thank you for spending it with me.